We're here to detain you until police arrive.
Mr. Carter, you've ignored notices. You think the rules don't apply to you?
Some Saturdays are meant for silence. A coffee on the porch. The steady hum of sprinklers. A neighborhood pretending the world beyond its cul-de-sacs doesn't exist. But this Saturday would strip away that illusion. Reginald Carter wasn't thinking about battles. He wasn't thinking about rules or neighbors or who belonged where. He was thinking about trash. One bag, tied loose, slipping in his grip as he stepped toward the curb. Then he saw them. 3 shadows at the end of his driveway. Linda Whitfield, the HOA president who carried herself like a judge, and 2 men in cheap tactical vests stamped with community enforcement. Their faces were stiff, their boots secondhand, their authority paper-thin. Yet their postures said otherwise. We own this street. We own you. Reginald stopped. The bag dropped, a soda can breaking loose and rattling into the gutter. The taller man raised his chin, mirrored glasses reflecting the morning sun. You're in violation. We're here to detain you. The words weren't loud, but they carried. Curtains shifted. Phones tilted up. A teenager whispered, "I'm live," as the red dot glowed. Neighbors who barely spoke to one another leaned closer to their windows. What should have been a quiet HOA dispute was about to become a trial played out on driveways. Linda's voice cut sharp. You think the rules don't apply to you. But they do. These men will make sure of it. The bearded one clutched a folded paper like scripture. The tall one slid a hand to his belt, daring anyone to notice the absence of a badge. And then, with all the weight of false power, he pulled out handcuffs. The sound of metal clinking against itself hushed the block. Parents held their children tighter. Even the wind stilled. Those cuffs weren't symbols of justice. They were theater, intimidation, desperation. Neighborhood arrest, the man said, his voice trembling at the edges. You're coming with us. Reginald's eyes narrowed, his body still, his voice even. One more step and you'll regret it. Not because of me. Because of what's coming for you. The neighbors gasped. Linda flushed red. The imposters bristled, trapped between their pride and the unraveling truth. And the street, every witness, every phone, every whisper, became the jury. That moment would split the neighborhood in 2. It would end with flashing lights, with Linda's empire collapsing in front of the very people she ruled through fear. And it would reveal the truth about Reginald Carter, the kind of truth no one in that cul-de-sac was prepared to face. But before the handcuffs fell to the ground, before reputations shattered and power was exposed for the fraud it was, we have to go back. To the morning it began. To the man who carried a trash bag to the curb and found himself standing in the crosshairs of arrogance and hate. And if you're here with me now, don't just watch. Hit that subscribe button, like this video, and stay with this story until the end. Because what you're about to hear isn't just drama on a quiet Texas street. It's a lesson about power, pride, and the cost of silence. The bag had just hit the concrete. The can had just rolled into the gutter. And Reginald Carter was about to step into the fight of his life. Sun broke over the roofs in a clean line and slid across Reginald Carter's kitchen floor like a ruler. He watched it crawl toward the baseboards while the coffee cooled in his hand. The street outside was already awake, sprinklers ticking at even intervals, a kid's chain creaking as he pedaled too hard, somebody dragging a bin to the curb with that hollow plastic groan that means nothing special is happening. That was precisely what he liked about Saturday, a promise of nothing special. He stood by the sink and let the quiet do its work. The refrigerator hummed. The AC exhaled once and went still. He could almost feel his heartbeat match the neighborhood's slow rhythm. It took years for him to teach his body to accept mornings like this, to stand without scanning doorways and corners, to drink coffee without cataloging exits. His life had other versions, older ones, sharper ones, that preferred hard edges. Here, he wore the softer one on purpose. On the mantel, a line of frames, soft focus family smiles, his mother's hands folded over his sister's, 2 nephews with skinned knees and gap-toothed grins, anchored the room. One photo was turned just a little, the glass catching sunlight at a different angle. In it he stood ramrod straight beside another man on the steps of a federal building, a badge just out of frame, an expression that didn't belong to Texas Saturdays. He never fully faced that picture in this house. Not because he was hiding, because the street didn't need that version of him to mow its lawns and wave at block parties. He rinsed his mug, tied the trash bag, too full, heavier than it should be, and palmed the doorknob. Heat met him on the porch like a hand on the chest. The air smelled like cut grass and hose water. Somewhere 2 houses down, a dog barked at a sparrow and felt victorious. He pulled the door shut with his heel and started down the driveway. The bag lip bit into his fingers. Midway, he paused, not for any reason he could name, just that small alertness that shows up when you've lived a life that pays for missing it. He let his eyes settle on details without moving his head. A curtain eased back in a second-story window. A mailbox door hung open longer than it needed to. A shadow on the sidewalk paused and pretended to check a phone. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. He kept walking. The bags not protested. A soda can pressed its rim against the plastic, trying to work its way out. He tightened his grip until the handle squeaked. Across the street, Mr. and Mrs. Henderson stood on their porch steps like bookends, him in a ball cap, her in those pale house slippers he'd seen 100 times. The Hendersons liked peace to the point of worship, the kind of folks who apologized for the mailman making noise. They nodded at him. He nodded back. 3 years ago he helped Mr. Henderson lift a ladder and never had to ask for a favor again. There are neighborhoods like that, built on the smallest saved moments. He had learned the local rules quickly. Don't leave cans out past Sunday night. No flags except the 2 approved. No holiday lights before December. Linda Whitfield's name was printed at the bottom of those emails in crisp serif font, followed by President, Willow Glen HO, as if it were a job that came with a uniform. It did in a way. She wore purpose like a sash. He never answered her notes. He just did what made sense, what didn't cost him anything, what kept the water level steady. He set the bag at the curb. The knot surrendered. A can slid free and clattered, pinwheeling toward the gutter with the dizzied wobble of something that used to be held in place. He reached to catch it, missed by half an inch, and left it to settle. That's when he saw them. 3 figures stood at the mouth of his driveway where sidewalk becomes property line. The sun hit them from behind, turning edges bright. Linda was in the middle, posture rigid enough to splinter. Hair pulled back, lips pressed thin, not anger yet, just an expression that said she'd rehearsed this walk. On either side of her, 2 men in black vests stitched with block letters, community enforcement. Tactical-ish, too many straps, too few reasons. One vest swallowed its owner at the shoulders, the other's Velcro flapped open at the hip. Their boots were scuffed raw at the toes, second-hand hard miles. He didn't move. He let the moment gather itself, the way you let a wave show you its height before you decide where to stand. Mr. Carter, Linda called, voice pitched for an audience. We need to talk. He straightened easy. Morning, he said, because it still was. About what? The taller man stepped in front of her by a half pace, like he'd been waiting for a cue only he heard. Shaved head glinting, mirrored shades flattening his eyes to blank. There was a beat too much stiffness in him, the kind you only learn by copying movies. Community enforcement, he said, flat as a line read. You're in violation. We're here to detain you until police arrive. Detain. The word landed between them and just sat there. Reginald let it be. Don't rush words like that. They reveal themselves faster if you don't help them. What is it you think I did? He asked, tone neutral as a thermostat. The shorter one fished out a folded printout like a magician with stage fright. Beard a little uneven, shoulders built but slumped at the edges, eyes flicking to Linda like he needed his lines fed. Property violations, he read. Non-compliance with orders. Unauthorized modifications to your driveway. Loud gatherings. Loud gatherings, Reginald repeated, not to mock him, just to hear the shape of the street's complaints out loud. He could name the night. A birthday grill, voices raising at halftime, laughter carrying farther than intended. He pictured their group on the patio, 3 friends and a cousin, the kind of small joy that takes up more space than it means to. He pictured a phone lighting up in Linda's hand. You've ignored notices, Linda said, crossing her arms tight enough to creak the seams. We cannot maintain standards if residents refuse to comply. He watched her face for the place where certainty frays. There it was, a tick at the corner of the mouth, a flash in the eyes when she said residence. She didn't like how the neighborhood felt when she couldn't measure it. There's no such thing as community enforcement, he said. And you know you're standing on my property. Don't try to lecture me, she snapped. Her laugh was small and hard. You think the rules don't apply because of who you are. People like... The words slammed on their own brakes. The silence after them had a shape. He let his gaze move to the tall man's hands. No radio. No cuff case. No duty belt, just a blank strip of nylon. Hands dry, a little shaky. This was a performance and he'd struck the loudest drum he could rent. Across the street, the Hendersons didn't go inside. 2 porches down, a young mother planted her feet and hit record, her baby balanced on her hip chewing the corner of a blanket. A boy in a basketball jersey lifted his phone above eye level so the live could see over the hedge. The street wasn't looking away anymore. He felt it on his skin. I'm asking you to step off the driveway, he said, voice even, volume unchanged. We can talk from the sidewalk. The tall one's jaw feathered, pride wincing at the suggestion that he move on command. He shifted a half step closer instead. Grit whispered under his boot. Reginald didn't back up. His fingers uncurled, palms open and visible at his sides. He marked space in quiet lines, angles, distance, what each move would cost. The shorter man's breathing picked up, chest rising too fast for the heat. Linda's chin lifted higher, making a thrown out of posture. This is simple, she said, but the edge in it betrayed the simplicity. You will come with these men and wait for officers, or we will escalate. Escalate how? He asked. Still calm. The word wasn't a dare. It was a mirror. The tall man reached into his vest and produced a pair of handcuffs. They were too clean, too shiny. They hadn't lived on a hip long enough to dull. He dangled them like proof. Metal clicked softly as links flexed, a sound just sharp enough to separate all the other noises from the air. The kid in the jersey said, "Yo," under his breath, because sometimes that's all you can say when something crosses a line you didn't know was there. "You're under neighborhood arrest," the tall one said. There was a tremor in it now, the body reminding the voice that it knows the truth. Neighbors breathed in as a group. Someone whispered, "Is that even legal?" to nobody in particular. Mr. Henderson's cap tilted forward a degree, like he wanted less sky and more sense. Reginald looked from the cuffs to the man holding them. He didn't laugh, didn't snarl, didn't perform. He let something old wake up behind his eyes. Discipline, not anger, a clean line, not a hard fist. When he spoke, it was quiet enough that everyone leaned a fraction closer. "If you put those on me," he said, "you'll answer for it." The shorter man swallowed. He kept his paper in both hands now, like it was a shield. "Maybe we should," he began, voice thin. "We're done asking," Linda cut in, loud enough for every porch to hear. "This is a community. We have order. We are not being bullied by someone who thinks he can live by his own rules." Her gaze flicked to the onlookers. She needed them to nod. Some did, without meaning to. Fear loves a head start. Others stared straight at Reginald, faces set in that quiet way people wear when they want the ending to be fair, not exciting. He turned his head just enough to take them in. The mother, the boy filming, the Hendersons, a man he only knew as the owner of the blue pickup. He saw their worry and their hunger for relief, and he let it settle in him with the heat. A street is a living thing. Today it wanted proof that it could survive itself. He shifted his stance by inches, aligning joints, finding balance the way you do before you lift something heavy. His shoulders softened. His jaw unclenched. No show. Just readiness. The tall man stepped into his space, cuffs swinging like punctuation. "Hands behind your back," he said, trying to squeeze command into syllables. "Last warning," Reginald replied. Not a bark, not a plea. A boundary. For a heartbeat, time thinned. He could feel the decision perched on the man's wrist like weight. He could feel Linda's push behind it, a gust disguised as policy. He could feel the neighborhood leaning to see which way gravity would choose. The cuffs twitched. He let the softest breath leave his chest, permission for his body to move the way it knows. The soda can at the curb finished its slow roll and kissed the gutter. The tall man reached. And the quiet Saturday the street wanted so badly to keep slipped out from under it. The cuffs glinted in the tall man's fist as if the morning sun had chosen sides. Metal clinked against metal, a sound too small for justice but loud enough to spread down the block like a ripple. Children froze on their bikes. Dogs hushed mid-bark. Even the mower cut off as if its owner had leaned back in the seat to listen. "You're under neighborhood arrest," the tall man said again, and this time his voice carried the thin crack of pride trying to disguise fear. Reginald Carter didn't move. His weight balanced evenly across both feet, arms loose at his sides, eyes steady. Calmness looked like surrender to some people. To others it looked like warning. The shorter man shuffled uneasily, folding and refolding the piece of paper he had read from, his fingers smudging the ink. He whispered, "Eddie, maybe we shouldn't?" The taller one, Eddie, snapped without turning his head. "Shut up. Stay in formation." Linda Whitfield flared at the interruption. Her voice cut sharper than the cuffs. "Don't lose your nerve. He's been laughing at us for years. It ends now." Reginald tilted his chin, enough for the line of his jaw to catch sunlight. "It ends now," he echoed softly. The quiet conviction in it rolled heavier than her command. "Hands behind your back." Eddie barked, stepping closer, his mirrored shades reflecting Reginald's face back at him, calm, unshaken. Eddie wanted to see fear. He wanted to see a man crack. But what stared back at him wasn't fear. It was recognition. "I'll give you one chance," Reginald said. "Step off my property." The air tightened. Phones caught the moment in trembling frames. From a porch across the street, a woman whispered to her husband, "Did he just tell them?" before her voice broke off, strangled by disbelief. Linda's mouth twitched with contempt. "Don't you dare give orders here. You're not in charge. This is my neighborhood, and I'll decide who belongs." The words landed like a dropped stone in still water. Neighbors shifted uncomfortably. The Hendersons exchanged a glance that spoke of hearing too much. The boy in the basketball jersey lowered his phone a fraction, startled by the nakedness of the line. Reginald's gaze fixed on her. "Say it plain," he told her, quiet enough to sting. "What kind of people don't belong?" Her cheeks flushed. She looked away for half a beat before regaining her posture. "You're twisting this. This is about order." But the order was crumbling in real time. Eddie's jaw flexed, his hand clenching the cuffs like a lifeline. The shorter one, Shah, shifted from foot to foot, sweat streaking his temple. His eyes darted from Reginald to Linda, then to the growing audience at the windows and porches. "This doesn't need to get ugly," Shah muttered. "Let's just, maybe he comes with us, sits tight, we wait for the cops." Reginald's laugh was quiet, but it cut. "The cops," he said. "The actual police? Or more men in second-hand boots and vests that don't fit?" The crowd reacted, low chuckles, murmurs, a couple of gasps. A teenager on the far porch muttered, "He got them." Phones zoomed closer. The block wasn't silent anymore. It was alive, every window an eye, every lens a witness. Linda bristled, her voice rising to cover the cracks. "Don't listen to him. These men are authorized by the board. They act with my full authority." "That's the problem," Reginald answered. "Your authority ends at your property line." Eddie's patience snapped. He lunged forward, swinging the cuffs toward Reginald's wrist. The crowd gasped as if one body. A woman shouted, "Don't touch him." Reginald didn't retreat. He pivoted half an inch, letting the man's motion overextend, and caught Eddie's wrist with an ease that looked like instinct. He didn't twist, didn't strike, just held it. Eddie froze, shocked by the sudden reversal, the simple strength of stillness. "Don't," Reginald said, his tone carrying the weight of warning without volume. "You don't want to finish this." For the first time, Eddie hesitated. The sweat on his temple glistened under the mirrored lenses. His bravado cracked where his arm bent under Reginald's grip. Shah stumbled back a step. "Eddie, don't push it. We'll get cooked for this." The neighborhood was murmuring now, loud enough to be its own chorus. "He's right. This is illegal. What are they thinking?" From behind blinds and phones, people were choosing sides. Linda's desperation flared. You think you're clever, Reginald? You think one little stunt makes you untouchable? You've ignored letters, fines, rules everyone else abides by. These men are here because you force our hand. Reginald looked at her with a kind of pity, his hand still on Eddie's arm. You brought imposters to my driveway. That's not order. That's desperation. He released Eddie suddenly. The man stumbled back, clutching his wrist, the cuffs dangling helplessly. A ripple of relief moved through the crowd, then sharpened again as Eddie straightened, humiliated, and barked, "Don't think this is over." "It already is," Reginald replied. The block erupted, not in cheers, but in restless judgment. Neighbors were no longer just spectators, they were jurors, whispering verdicts to one another. A man down the street yelled, "This isn't enforcement, it's harassment." Another voice, female louder, "We saw it, Linda. We all saw it." Phones kept rising. Lives kept streaming. Evidence multiplied in real time. Linda's face paled. She snapped back, "Don't listen to him. He's manipulating all of you. He doesn't respect the standards that keep us safe." A woman with a toddler on her hip shouted back, "Safe? My baby's watching this. You brought fake cops to our block." The baby whimpered against her shoulder, the sound tearing through the heat sharper than any words. Shaw tore the Velcro patch from his vest and let it fall. The cheap fabric fluttered against the driveway like confession. "I'm done," he muttered, his voice shaking. "I didn't sign up for this." The crowd gasped. Phones zoomed tighter. Eddie whirled on him. "Coward!" But the damage was done. The illusion had broken. One imposter exposed, one clinging to crumbling pride, Linda standing alone at the center like a queen whose crown had turned to paper. Reginald's eyes swept the crowd, then returned to Eddie. "You've got one chance left," he said evenly. "Drop the cuffs. Walk away." Eddie's jaw clenched. He looked from Linda to the gathering witnesses to the lens of a phone pointed inches from his face. His hand shook. Pride warred with the truth settling in on him like heatstroke. Linda screamed, "Don't you dare! Finish it!" Her voice cracked, shrill, desperate. It was no longer the tone of leadership but of panic. And in that panic, the neighborhood saw her for what she was, not a protector of rules, but a woman grasping at power she no longer had. Reginald didn't move. He didn't need to. The block itself was pushing Eddie to a verdict. The handcuffs trembled in his grip. Sweat slid down his temple. Every phone was watching. Every eye was recording. And when Eddie made his choice, the neighborhood would decide what justice looked like. The cuffs hung heavy in Eddie's trembling hand. He gripped them like a lifeline, his chest rising fast, sweat already darkening the collar of his vest. Across the driveway, Reginald Carter hadn't shifted an inch. His stillness radiated the kind of control Eddie could only mimic. And the neighborhood, once a quiet audience behind glass, was now alive, restless, and murmuring, 100 unblinking witnesses. The silence broke with a single voice. A man across the street shouted, "Drop the cuffs." His tone carried the weight of someone fed up with charades. Murmurs surged in agreement. "This isn't right," another neighbor called. A woman near the corner said loudly, "Linda, you've lost it this time." Linda Whitfield's cheeks burned crimson. She snapped toward the voices, her composure unraveling. "Quiet. None of you understand. This is about rules, about protecting our homes." Her words rang shrill, not commanding. The baby on the young mother's hip whimpered again, louder this time, and the mother shook her head. "My child's watching this circus. Protecting us? You brought danger to our doors." The crowd stirred, their judgment hardening with each passing second. Linda could feel the tide turning. Her voice rose higher, desperate to plug holes in a ship already sinking. "You've all been complaining about him. You told me. The late nights, the cars, the people he brings. He thinks he's above us." But no one spoke up to defend her. The silence that followed was damning. Those who had whispered their frustrations in private had no courage to say them aloud now, not with phones recording and fear traded for indignation. Reginald's gaze stayed locked on Eddie. "Steady. "You've already crossed the line," he said, his voice low but audible to everyone. "Put those cuffs on me and you're not walking home. You'll leave here in the back of a real squad car." Eddie's jaw worked furiously, the muscles twitching. He glanced at Linda, then at Shah, who stood stripped of his patch, shame slumping his shoulders. "This isn't worth it," Shah muttered again, louder this time. "We'll be the ones paying for this." "Shut up," Eddie barked, his voice cracking like a brittle branch. But even as he shouted, his hand shook harder. The cuffs rattled audibly, a clumsy soundtrack to his unraveling. The boy in the basketball jersey raised his phone higher and shouted for the stream. "He's losing it, y'all. Look at his hands." Laughter rippled faintly through the crowd, brittle but unmistakable. Eddie's face flushed under the mirrored shades. Linda clutched her arms tight across her chest, glaring at her neighbors. "Don't you dare laugh. You'll thank me when this place doesn't fall apart. He's a threat to everything we built." Reginald finally shifted, just a small step closer, not threatening but certain. His voice cut the air cleanly. "I shovel your sidewalks in the winter. I carry groceries when hands are full. I've lived here quietly by choice. And you, Linda, call that a threat because you can't control it." The crowd roared in murmurs, agreement, shame, recognition. The Hendersons, silent until now, spoke from their porch. Mr. Henderson's voice was gravelly but steady. "We've lived here 20 years. He's the best neighbor we've had. What you're doing isn't leadership. It's madness." Mrs. Henderson added, sharper, "And we all know what you meant when you said people like him." The words hit harder than a stone. Linda froze, her mouth opening and shutting, but nothing came out. The neighbor's whispers sharpened into open condemnation. "We heard it too." She showed her hand. "This isn't about rules, it's about prejudice." Eddie's bravado wavered. The cuffs sagged lower as if dragged by gravity. He looked around wildly, searching for an ally, but every face was turned against him now. Even Shah had taken another step back, arms folded tight, refusing to move closer. Reginald's voice dropped, intimate yet strong enough for the block to hear. "Listen to me, Eddie. Linda won't stand next to you when the real police roll up. She'll save herself. You'll be the one answering questions, sitting in a cell, wondering why you let pride wreck your life." The words pierced. Eddie's throat bobbed. Sweat dripped from his temple, streaking the pale skin where his shaved head met his neck. The metal cuffs rattled once more, weaker this time. Then Linda screamed, "Don't you dare quit. Finish it. Put him down and show everyone we're serious." Gasps erupted. A woman shouted, "Are you insane?" Another voice, louder, "She's lost her mind. This isn't law. It's harassment." Eddie's face twisted between rage and fear. He lunged forward suddenly, cuffs raised. The crowd shrieked. Phones tilted, capturing every frame. But Reginald was faster. He stepped aside with calm precision, caught Eddie's arm, and turned it effortlessly behind his back. The motion was fluid, controlled, almost graceful. In less than 3 seconds, Eddie was bent forward, his own cuffs locked on his wrists. The neighborhood erupted. Shouts of disbelief. Gasps of awe. A teenager yelled, "Did you see that?" He flipped him with nothing. Eddie stumbled, restrained, his pride shattered, his bravado extinguished. His mirrored glasses slid down his nose, revealing wide, panicked eyes. "This isn't legal," he shouted, his voice breaking. "You can't do this." Reginald held him steady, applying no more force than necessary. His tone was cool, professional. "I didn't. You did this to yourself." Linda shrieked, her composure collapsing completely. "You can't arrest him. You're twisting everything. You don't belong here, Reginald. You never have." The words echoed down the block, ugly and raw. Neighbors shouted back instantly, "That's enough, Linda. We all heard you. You exposed yourself." The Hendersons shook their heads in unison. Mrs. Henderson called out, "It's over, Linda. Everyone sees you now." Phones zoomed tighter. The evidence piled up in pixels and whispers. Shah, hands trembling, tore the vest from his shoulders and let it fall to the ground. "I'm not going down for this," he said, his voice shaking. "I'm done. She tricked us into this." All eyes turned to Linda. Her face blazed crimson, her lips quivering, her fists clenching at her sides. She spun on the crowd. "You're all cowards. You want rules until it inconveniences you. You'll regret this when the neighborhood falls apart." But the crowd wasn't listening anymore. They had judged. The jury of porches and phones had already spoken. Reginald looked at her once, disappointment plain in his eyes. "You don't understand leadership. You never did. Control isn't respect. Fear isn't order." Eddie slumped in his grip, muttering curses under his breath, but they carried no weight anymore. Shah stood off to the side, shaking his head, muttering, "I should have walked away sooner." The block was transformed. What began as a private standoff had become a public reckoning. Curtains were wide open now, doors cracked, neighbors leaning out, united in judgment. For the first time in years, Linda Whitfield was alone. And then, in the distance, faint but undeniable, sirens cut through the air. Red and blue lights flickered against the far end of the street, growing brighter with every second. Phones swung to catch them, voices rose in anticipation, the hum of squad radios bleeding into the morning heat. The imposters had wanted to play cops. The real ones were almost here. Reginald straightened his posture, his hands still steady on Eddie's cuffed wrists. His eyes never left Linda. "This is your reckoning," he said quietly, "and it's coming faster than you think." The sirens grew louder, sharp and absolute, drowning out her protests, her excuses, her trembling rage. The block waited for judgment to arrive, united in silence except for the sound of flashing lights drawing closer. The sirens grew sharper as the squad cars rolled into the cul-de-sac, tires crunching against the asphalt. Red and blue lights splashed across the brick houses, transforming the quiet street into a stage. Neighbors who had been hiding behind blinds now opened their doors fully, phones lifted higher. This was no longer a dispute. It was an arrest scene. Reginald Carter kept his grip steady on Eddie's cuffed wrists. Eddie sagged under the weight of his own choices, sweat dripping off his brow. She stood at the edge of the driveway, his vest discarded, his expression pale with regret. Linda Whitfield trembled in the middle of it all, her face locked between fury and dread, her hands balled into fists at her sides. The first squad car stopped diagonally across the street. 2 officers stepped out, hands hovering near their belts. "Hands where we can see them," one barked, his voice sharp, trained, leaving no space for debate. Reginald raised his free hand slowly, the other still holding Eddie controlled but unharmed. His tone was steady. "Officers, I am Special Agent Reginald Carter with the FBI. Badge and credentials are in my pocket. The man in my custody attempted to impersonate law enforcement and assault me on my property." The second officer's eyes flicked to the phones capturing every angle. He approached cautiously. "Let's see your credentials, sir." Reginald reached carefully into his back pocket and withdrew his worn leather wallet. He flipped it open, holding it high enough for both officers and the neighborhood to see. The gold badge glinted under the flashing lights. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The boy in the basketball jersey whispered loudly, "I knew it." Phones zoomed closer, recording every detail. A woman clapped her hand to her mouth, murmuring, "He's FBI." All this time, Eddie's legs buckled slightly, the weight of the badge heavier than the cuffs biting his wrists. His bravado collapsed into panic. "She told us," she said. His voice cracked, words dissolving into incoherent mutters. Shah's head dropped into his hands. "I didn't know. God help me, I didn't know," he whispered, the shame audible even through the murmurs of the neighbors. Linda's face went white. Her mouth opened, but only a tremor escaped. No, this isn't right. He's lying. That can't be real." Reginald's eyes fixed on her, calm but cutting. "You didn't do your homework, Linda. You thought intimidation would keep this neighborhood under your thumb. But you had no idea who you were standing against." The taller officer examined the badge, then looked back at Reginald with respect. "It checks out. We'll take it from here." Reginald nodded, releasing Eddie into their custody. Eddie collapsed against the patrol car, muttering curses and excuses as the officers secured him. The cuffs clinked again, this time with the authority of real law behind them. The younger officer turned to Linda. "Ma'am, multiple witnesses confirm you directed these men to impersonate law enforcement. That's a serious crime. We need you to step aside and answer some questions." Linda shook her head violently. "You don't understand. I was protecting the neighborhood. He doesn't belong here. I was just doing my job." The crowd erupted with outrage. "That's enough, Linda," shouted Mrs. Henderson. "You endangered all of us." Another voice called, "This isn't protection, it's harassment." Phones shook as neighbors shouted, "We saw it all. You're finished." The officer's patience thinned. "Ma'am, calm yourself. If you continue to resist, we will treat this as obstruction." Linda's voice broke into a scream. "You're all blind. He's the problem. People like him ruin communities." The words landed like poison. Gasps cut through the crowd. Even those who had stayed silent could not ignore the venom in her tone. A woman holding her toddler shouted back, "Shame on you. We heard it." Others echoed, "We all heard it, Linda. We're done with you." Reginald's expression didn't change, but his silence carried judgment louder than any words. The officers stepped in, taking Linda by the arm. She resisted for a moment, her face twisted with rage, but the officer's grip held firm. Phones captured every second as the woman who once ruled the block was escorted toward the waiting squad car. She raised his hands weakly, his voice breaking. "I'll cooperate. I'll tell you everything she planned. I want no part in this anymore." The officers signaled him to stay aside for questioning. The cul-de-sac had transformed into a courtroom. Neighbors spoke openly now, their voices a rising tide of disgust. "She's finished. I can't believe she risked all this. She tried to bring the whole block into her mess." Children clung to their parents, eyes wide as they watched Linda shoved gently into the back seat of the squad car. For years she had been the face of power in the neighborhood. Now she was a spectacle, her authority shattered under the flashing red and blue lights. Reginald exhaled slowly, finally releasing the tension coiled in his body. He looked at the neighbors, at their fear, their relief, their disbelief. "This isn't about lawn heights or driveways," he said, his voice even but carrying across the block. "It's about people who fake authority, people who trade fear for respect. That ends tonight." The crowd murmured in agreement. Some clapped softly. Others just nodded, their eyes fixed on the man they thought was only the quiet neighbor at the end of the street. Officer Ramirez, the senior of the two, approached Reginald. "Agent Carter, you handled this clean. We'll file impersonation, unlawful restraint, conspiracy. The DA will want your statement, but I think the videos speak for themselves." Reginald nodded once. "Make sure you don't forget instigation." He flicked his eyes toward Linda, now pale and defeated behind the glass of the squad car. Ramirez followed his gaze. "We won't." As the officers prepared to leave, the Hendersons stepped off their porch. Mrs. Henderson's voice carried over the hum of the radios. "You didn't just protect yourself, Reginald. You protected all of us." Mr. Henderson added, firm, "And you showed us what real authority looks like. Not her kind. The real kind." Neighbors murmured their agreement. Some shook their heads in shame for staying quiet too long. Others whispered thanks. The boy in the basketball jersey shouted, 1 million views already. They're all seeing it." Reginald glanced at him, his voice steady but not boastful. "Let them see. Let them learn what happens when fear pretends to be power." The street fell into a hush again as the squad cars pulled away. Eddie cuffed and broken, Linda caged by her own arrogance, Shaw slumped against the curb awaiting his turn. The flashing lights painted the houses in alternating strokes of red and blue. A neighborhood once ruled by fear was now bound by truth. But the reckoning wasn't just for the imposters or Linda Whitfield. It was for every neighbor who had watched in silence until silence was no longer safe. And as the lights disappeared around the corner, Reginald Carter stood in his driveway, a quiet figure under the darkening sky, knowing the block would never look at him, or itself, the same way again. By Sunday morning, the cul-de-sac no longer looked like itself. The squad cars had gone, the flashing lights replaced by the steady gold of dawn, but the residue of what had happened clung to the air. Neighbors walked slower past one another. Conversations that once stayed behind hedges spilled into the open. The street had become a mirror, reflecting truths they could no longer ignore. Linda Whitfield's house sat silent. The blinds were pulled tight, her car absent from the driveway. An HOA email arrived before noon, written in stiff, careful language, announcing an emergency meeting to reassess leadership. Nobody needed a meeting to know Linda was finished. Her authority had collapsed in front of the very people she ruled, and her desperate screams still echoed in their minds. Eddie's mugshot appeared online before breakfast. The face that had strutted in mirrored glasses was now pale, drawn, and broken. His record revealed scraps of trouble, unpaid fines, disorderly conduct, petty theft. Nothing that granted him authority, everything that marked him as a man chasing power he could not earn. Shah, meanwhile, was left adrift. His cooperation might spare him prison, but it would not spare him the shame of being remembered as one of Linda's pawns. The video of the confrontation spread fast. Clips shot from porches, phones, and live streams poured across social media. The moment Eddie raised the cuffs, the second Reginald reversed the hold. The instant he revealed his FBI badge. Each frame replayed endlessly, framed as both spectacle and lesson. By Monday, local news anchors were calling it the Plano standoff. By Wednesday, national outlets were debating what it revealed about homeowners associations, abuse of authority, and the cost of silence. Through it all, Reginald Carter tried to live the same way he always had. He rose early, carried out his trash, jogged his route, and waved at the Hendersons when they waved first. But he felt the difference in every look, every pause. Neighbors who once barely nodded now approached to thank him. Some stumbled over their words, apologizing for staying quiet too long. Others simply said, "We're glad you live here." The weight of those words was heavier than the confrontation itself. Tuesday evening, the board gathered the community in the small park at the center of the neighborhood. Folding chairs lined the grass, children ran underfoot, and every household sent someone. The atmosphere was cautious but buzzing, a neighborhood trying to make sense of itself. When Reginald arrived, conversations hushed. People expected him to speak, though he hadn't been invited to. Harold Jennings, the interim HOA president, asked him to address the group. Reginald stood before them, not in a suit, not with a badge on display, but as the man who had carried a trash bag to the curb like everyone else. His voice was steady, not raised, but every head leaned in to catch his words. What happened on Saturday wasn't about driveways or bylaws, he said. It wasn't even about me. It was about fear disguised as authority, and what happens when people stay silent until fear grows too loud to ignore. The crowd shifted, uneasy but listening. He continued. Linda thought she was protecting this neighborhood, but what she protected wasn't safety. It was control. And control built on intimidation is fragile. All it takes is light to expose it. A hand rose from the back. Mrs. Henderson, her voice firm despite her age, asked, "What do we do next time someone tries something like this?" Reginald didn't hesitate. You stand together. You speak up. Bullies only have power when good people stay quiet. What broke on Saturday wasn't just Linda's authority. It was the silence that allowed her to act unchecked. The crowd murmured in agreement. Parents looked at their children, whispering explanations. Teenagers streamed it live again, capturing the block's first step toward healing. Reginald's eyes settled on them. Don't just share drama online. Share the truth. Share what accountability looks like. Later that evening, as the meeting dissolved into smaller conversations and neighbors who hadn't spoken in years shook hands, Reginald walked home slowly. The street felt different, lighter, freer, though scarred. He paused at the edge of his driveway, the same place where it had all begun. The memory of Linda's voice, of Eddie's trembling hands, of the neighbors' collective gasps still clung to the air. But so did something else. The knowledge that fear had been broken in the open, not hidden behind blinds. He thought about his years in the bureau. The times he faced cartels, gangs, men who built empires on violence. Yet here, in a quiet suburban cul-de-sac, He had seen something just as corrosive, the misuse of community, the twisting of rules into weapons. And it reminded him of a truth he had carried all his life. Sometimes the hardest battles aren't fought in war zones, but in the places meant to feel safest. He whispered it to himself, almost like a prayer. The truth always comes to light. Children's laughter floated from the end of the block, bouncing off brick walls. Porch lights clicked on one by one as the sky deepened. Life had moved forward, but the driveway had become more than concrete. It was now a marker, a place where power met resistance, where silence shattered, where justice, however small, took shape. And for those who had watched it unfold, the lesson was clear. Real authority does not come from titles or intimidation. It comes from accountability, from respect, from standing firm when it matters most. If you are listening to this story, ask yourself what kind of community you want to live in. Do you want one ruled by fear and silence, or one built on respect and courage? That choice doesn't belong to presidents or boards. It belongs to each of us. So if this story resonated with you, if it opened your eyes or reminded you of the power of truth, I humbly request you to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Every voice matters, and every story like this deserves to be remembered, not as gossip, but as a reminder that justice is possible when people refuse to stay silent. Because justice doesn't end at the edge of one driveway. It begins wherever we decide to stand together.